Good morning, everybody. This is Perry Gruber from the Copiosis organization, founder of Copiosis. We are starting with our live stream today. Today, we're going to be talking about I want to say the five power pillars. I hope that's right. We'll find out. And we are here today talking about the five power pillars. So, listen, one of the big things about Copiosis is that let me see over here what's going on with my live stream. Just want to check some things here. There it goes. We are we're up against a huge set of forces as we attempt to transition from the current reality where we're all dealing with debt, money, markets, governments, etc., and into a new reality. In order to make that transition happen, we have to come up against these five power pillars. And to be honest with you, I had never heard of the five power pillars until I met our guest and political strategist for Copiosis, Christopher Hatton. So we're going to talk today about the five power pillars and what that means for Copiosis and how we're going to leverage their power in order to create the reality that we want. But before we go into the show itself, let me just remind you that you're watching the Copiosis live stream on the YouTube channel. If you want to find out more about Copiosis, maybe you don't know a lot, or maybe you've heard a little bit but want to dive deep, you can go to this website, copiosis.com, and find out all you need to know. You can also reach out to us via the contact form there and ask us any question. We usually get back to you in less than a couple of days. And then also, if you know a lot about Copiosis and you want to find out more about our budgets, what we're doing with the money that people are sending us to implement our transition plan, you can go to this website right here, patreon.com. And there you can find all your financial answers. And then if you're interested, if you're inspired, you could also become a patron for as little as $1 a month. Of course, our average giving at this point is about $15 a month. So would really appreciate one a little more than $1 a month, but please feel free to give $1 a month if you'd like. And then finally, if you haven't already, please feel free to click the subscribe button on our channel. And don't forget to hit the bell, because when you do so, you will be alerted when we post any new videos or schedule any new live streams. And then finally, in the near future, we're going to be having probably a new live stream with Michael Vick, who is going to be talking about some new initiatives we have going on in the political space. So without further ado, let me introduce to you Christopher Hatton. Christopher, it's good to see you again. Welcome.
Thanks, Barry. Good to see you. This is going to be an excellent discussion, and we can definitely, kind of paint a picture of what it's going to look like in the future through the lens of Copiosis in regards to, society as it exists now versus the society that we're all trying to create here.
Right on. Yeah. So we're talking about the five power pillars today. So why don't we start, since you introduced me to this concept, why don't we start by talking about what are the five power pillars and how do they show up in our reality today?
So the five power pillars themselves are we have government, we have business, we have religion, we have the nonprofit space or the NGO space, and we have a pocket of other. So a lot of things can go into the other, but we'll specifically talk about personal power, and then things that individuals can do to empower themselves. So creating a portfolio on that personal power. And then other things like violence and coercion and threats and trickery, and power can be obtained in many different ways, and we see all of it in the world today, and we'll briefly touch on that.
Right on. So we're talking about the five main ones. So we've got the government, business, religion. I'm really curious to talk about that one, religion, and how did these power pillars come to be, in your opinion?
So, on a very fundamental level, I believe that everything has the opportunity to gravitate into um, sorry, my cat just jumped on the table here.
Yoda.
Uh, Gravitate into a hierarchy, but I firmly believe that everything begins as a mesh network, so a decentralized network. And I'll go on to argue even uh, you know the way humans lived before civilization. You had pockets of like 30 to 70 people where
Yeah,
it was a cooperative effort, and
yeah,
um, it was more delegative, and then sacrifices would be made so you wouldn't be taking food away from the young, and
yeah.
it's like this self encapsulated existence, and then we created agriculture and civilizations, and that's what really began the centralization of humanity, was after we created agriculture.
Right,
and,
and then
and
we saw leaders pop up, kings and village councils and things like that, that essentially allowed decision making, which is a kind of power, to rise to those hierarchical levels that you're describing, and eventually that established what we would call government, I presume. And then on the
yeah,
other side, you had people like shamans, or spiritualists, let's call them, who also rose kind of at the same time. And so you had the second, maybe not the second pillar, but one of the other pillars, which was spirituality turning into this thing called religion. Is that correct?
that's correct. And because I'd argue that spirituality has been around since the beginning.
That's right.
Religion is an effect of the centralized aspect of it.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
and I would go on to say that yeah, and then so people would participate in these civilizations, these city states, at the sacrifice of their own freedoms and thoughts, forced from above. And you kind of explained it really well, how it kind of gravitated into this decision making process, which then created the chain of command, which then created this reporting system, which then created this kind of centralized, surveillance, uh, to make sure everybody was doing what was coming down from above. So
Right, right. So we had a population. They were It's hard to say from my perspective that they were forced, because in a sense, one of the reasons, I mean, there was an argument way back, that kings or leaders were descended from gods, and so they had the moral authority, and there was this idea of the benevolent king, and people were giving up their freedoms willingly in return for more food abundance, more prosperity, more organization, less violence, more peace, um, more leisure, perhaps even. But then things kind of went screwy when kings started getting kind of powerful. And then they started extracting the wealth or the prosperity from the people and funneling that up in order for them to fuel their expansionary plans, their wars. And that's when we run into the conflict between government, so to speak, and people. Would you agree with that, or what do I have wrong there?
no, that's piece of, yeah, that's absolutely correct, and it goes further, when you can't control your chain of command, and then they act out, and then this causes this fear from the people that, oh, this is, what the will of the leader, and the leader might not have any knowledge of what happened, and then the leader would have to stick up for its chain of command.
That's
So then
right.
it's like, it's this feedback loop, which creates this situation where, um, you know, more and more of the individual thoughts of all of the people within the jurisdiction go towards the leader, which is, that's completely against what we think of as freedom of thought, freedom of expression, and freedom of speech.
That's right. And so we're getting to the point, and we're getting to today. But so, and then to say, so the religious leaders and the kings saw opportunity with regard to expansion and wealth accumulation, and so they kind of joined forces. Um, I mean, the big joining of forces was the church and the kings in the time of when Catholic religion was really big. But I'm pretty sure there was probably some merging before that. But when we saw this combination of church and state, which is one of the reasons why the United States has a separation, an enormous amount of power was concentrated in those two pillars. Would you agree at that point?
I would, and I think it helps solidify the creation of our nation by saying you can worship all religions under one umbrella, and that was, I think that was the first at the time. Uh, besides some pilgrim roads, but underneath a nation that's pretty incredible. And 1776 was a pivotal
Yep.
year in the world, and I think when you think about the pillars individually, yes, government and religion have definitely had the most accumulation over time. And then more recently here, we've seen business pop into the picture. And I
Yep.
know that KJ has a good working history of, the creation of our current systems, through feudalism and mercantilism and such. Um, and I think the the incredible growth in the power accumulation through the business sector has definitely taken a toll on um, all these things that we're talking about. Taking little pieces of individual freedoms away at a time, um, unknowingly to the people that they're being taken away from
Yeah.
through a search on Google, or a conversation that's being overheard by the microphone,
Yeah.
and then utilizing that information to um, benefit them at your cost. So
Yeah.
that's a trend for sure.
So we've done a good job so far describing how the emergence of the power pillar government came to be and the emergence of the power pillar religion came to be. Now we're touching on this other one called business. I want to expand that maybe and say perhaps it's more than business, and maybe it's markets. So the regulated nature of government and the market players, which is more than, I guess you could say, more than business, because it's also speculators in the market, like financiers and investors and people like and banks, right? So there's an ecosystem that exists within this pillar that we're calling business. Would you agree with that, or do I have it wrong?
No, I completely agree with that. And if you go back to the origins of, insurance,
Yeah.
when the ships didn't come back, and it was like, oh, did the load get to where, were we going to get that money? We have to start underwriting this stuff. So
Yeah.
we have all the shippers then participating in covering the cost if the ship didn't come back or deliver goods. Um, and then that evolving into, um, right, with the monetary system,
Yep.
into IOUs and paper money away
Yep.
from solid coinage.
Yep.
That definitely created this acceleration of using the mind to create this monetary incentive rather than physical raw materials, goods, or money.
Yep.
So yeah, and then individual sectors themselves, um, comprised of many different businesses that are competing, and then you can develop a market aspect around that, um, combining all of these, mind games that you can play into creating value, um, in general, I would say.
Yeah, yeah, and then I think we saw the opportunity where people within each of these first three pillars, government, religion, and markets or business, saw the opportunity to leverage their power by infiltrating the other two pillars. So, for example, politicians and government, even today, see some ability to increase their power by amassing wealth through speculating in the markets. And then in the other direction, business people see a way to amplify their power, not only by becoming politicians themselves, but also by capturing regulatory bodies that are supposed to be providing oversight to the businesses, and then influencing the decisions that are made by the regulatory bodies, which allow more lax environments for the business people to participate in what they're doing, thereby accumulating their power and wealth. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, and another way to put that is you go in and try to get either laws or rules passed to benefit you and hurt your opponents. And this
That's
is
right.
the core foundation of lobbying. And
Right.
uh, it's not illegal, and I know that it hasn't been illegal since the beginning. It's highly regulated, but there are definitely ways around the regulation.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
And so remind us, what are the five pillars? Because we talked about government, we talked about religion. We're now talking about markets. The next one was nonprofits, is it?
yeah, so where you have to look at where all the money flows,
Where does the
and
money flow?
the money, well, usually it flows up, not down. Um, so um, the NGO nonprofit space is kind of a middleman in that aspect because you are trying to take money from above and kind of either create processes or systems that can filter some of that money down to increase quality of life or increase efficiency within a business, however you want to look at it. It's the full gambit there. And I would argue that uh, power accumulates with these entities because they then become decision makers in allocation of budget that can then empower other units, whether it be individual business, local government, whatever. So it is a power accumulation force that then creates influence. NRA is a good example, and they
Oh yeah.
recently declared bankruptcy, but they're going to restructure and go forth from there. So we'll see how all of the, but there's millions of them. So
Well, no, this is really interesting because I originally would think, well, is the nonprofit sector really a power pillar? I mean, they're so poor and relatively unorganized compared to business. But you're right. Organizations like the NRA, organizations that, uh, nonprofit organizations that fund STEM education, for example. So there's this big initiative to fund science, technology, engineering, and math education. And the reason why many of those organizations fund that kind of thing, yes, is because that education provides for jobs, but it also stimulates an advanced um, technology. It stimulates a larger pool of educated people who can work in those companies and thus provide the forward progress and the prosperity and the wealth accumulation of the people who own those companies. So again, we're looking at government, religion, markets, and now nonprofits, and how they all kind of work together to exacerbate or increase their individual pillars' power. It's really fascinating, isn't it?
it is, and then together they design the society from which we live through laws and programs and systems and physical buildings and institutions which we can become members of. But here's the thing. um, the incentives
Yeah.
are wrong. The incentives are not aimed for everybody. They're aimed for a target market, which has a prerequisite to become members, which creates further division, which creates more chaos, as we're seeing now. The division isn't necessarily working for our benefit anymore. Um, so
What do
I'd,
you?
I'd like to segue incentives into the copiosis talk. When
Yeah,
we when
yeah.
we
We'll talk about that in a second after the first break. But real quickly, we've got about 2 minutes before the break. What membership are you talking about? Who are these people that you're talking about that have the ability to fit in this membership? What is this membership that you're talking about?
So it's definitely not everything because like public libraries are available for everybody. But you know, when you have a nonprofit, for example, that gives rating systems based on values and track record in the past, then that if you get an A+ rating from that particular like the NRA, for example,
Yes.
uh,
Oh, yeah.
you then are viewed higher in esteem for the political spectrum and uh, gun owners themselves and such. So this is a frequent thing across all sectors, including business. And business does it with requirements to get in a job. Same with government. You have the requirements, and then you have to be if you're getting into a legislature, you have to. Um, define where you stand on the spectrum. And religion is an obvious one,
Yeah,
because
obvious.
it's like you either believe or you don't. And then so then an individual then becomes this subset of prerequisites to enter into these memberships, which then has the person focusing on what makes them different instead of what makes us all alike.
Gotcha. Real quickly, let's take a break, and then I'd like you, while we're taking the break, Christopher, I'd like you to think about an analog to the NRA, but on the left, because we're beating up on the NRA. So let's think of an organization that's similar to the NRA and its influence, but on the left. But before we do that, let's take this break real quick. You guys, this is the Copiosis live stream. Uh, this is a unique live stream. We do these every once in a while. It's not a regular one, but maybe it'll become regular. But this is a Copiosis live stream. We're talking about the 5 power pillars, the pillars that prop up our society today, that have been around for hundreds, maybe thousands of years. And we're talking about how Copiosis in our transition plan will leverage the power pillars in order to make the transition that we're implementing successful. And in the first part of the show, we have talked about what the power pillars are. We've gotten through 4 of them. I think there's one more we got to cover. And then in the second hour, or second segment of the hour, we're going to talk about how we are implementing the Copiosis transition plan in a way that leverages these 5 power pillars. If you are new to our channel, I suggest that you go ahead and click that subscribe button so that you do not miss out on any last minute scheduled live streams or any of our regularly scheduled live streams. If you would please also click that bell so that you get notified of any time that we add new videos to our channel. And then also, if you're interested in wanting to find out more about Copiosis, you can go to copiosis.com. And then even though it's not on the show here, if you're interested in interacting with us directly in more of a live format, you can go to our social group on Facebook. Just search for Copiosis Social Group on Facebook. All right, before we jump back into it and have you describe for me, Chris, a left version of the NRA. One of our viewers has asked that you tell us what your qualifications are. So say a little bit about yourself before we jump back into the conversation, please.
I should always start with that. I always forget.
I should too. I know. We keep missing it.
Thanks for the question. Educationally, I have a bachelor's in economics, a master of public policy degree, and a master of business administration. I've done a lot of work for government and consulting. Currently, I'm working in the Michigan legislature as a legislative director, and a lot of really immersed in the politics and policy creation. So I do a lot of things in different committees, and work for the constituents in my boss's jurisdictions. And then it's a pretty interesting work space, and then working on campaigns for politicians and such. So it's pretty interesting to be able to be at the intersection of all these things, in the legislature, because you get to hear from all stakeholders.
I just want to add, because I found out about this from you last week. Not only are you currently a Republican, but I think you said you were also a Michigan delegate. Is that correct?
Yeah. So that's happening on first. So that's in 2 days. We elect our Republican head of the state and all of the people to help run the Republican Party. And that's an interesting jockeying for position type situation also.
Yeah.
But you hear you hear about these things in the news, but when you're participating in them, it can be very confrontational, and then sometimes it can be so smooth that it makes you smile. So, but it's largely it's just a solidification of our original you know, the way we set it up. So it's
Right.
archaic. It is archaic, but you
Yeah.
know, it's working. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
working.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so back to the conversation. Thank you, TC, for asking for Christopher's qualifications. And you're right, Chris, we should be doing this. We should introduce you at the beginning in that way going forward. All right, so from the left, from the progressive side, what would be an analog to the NRA on the left, in your opinion?
So, you know, there's a lot of you know, protecting gun rights on the left too, but we've seen this kind of movement towards let's create something that would um, you know, identify gun violence as a public health crisis, and then see if we
Hmm.
can't shift funding to that type of mechanism. So there is a new nonprofit, um, relatively new. I think it's 2017, but it's called Affirm, and that stands for American Foundation for Firearm Injury Reduction.
Mm,
And they are using an analytics-based model to, you know, measure changes in gun violence to creating a public health, you know, initiative to fund certain projects.
got it.
And
So sorry to interrupt. So you're answering specifically my question. So I should have asked my question better. So like the NRA has this huge influence on American politics, not just with regard to gun rights, but they, at least in the past, used to be able to have such an influence on that they would essentially be one of the organizations that that knighted political candidates on the right and somewhat on the left. So is there a progressive organization, not necessarily within the gun rights arena, is there a progressive organization that has that kind of influence on American politics?
so you know,
I know it's
yes,
opinion, but
there are definitely many um, you know, organizations that fall into that, and um, you know, I think it's important to kind of, you know, you if you want to, you can tackle the issues one at a time. There's climate based
yeah,
organizations that say,
yeah,
hey, we get like a conservation voters. You know, they rank based on how people are with green energy.
got it.
Um, and then you go like civil rights. So that's a
Oh, right.
big piece, and
Yep,
it's like, oh, if you're this is the type of rhetoric you're saying as a right wing person, you know, you're going to fall into this category every time.
gotcha,
You know, shift your rhetoric will move you up in the
gotcha.
rankings. Um, so, but yeah, it there and it holds massive influence because our trend over time as Americans have been, um, you know, correcting our nature so that we're more inclusive.
Yeah,
And it doesn't stick with everybody. You know, people are
right.
like, "Oh no, we can't allow that to happen." And you know, I'm still going to discriminate on the way you feel or think, even though I can't discriminate on the way you look. Um,
Exactly.
but that you know, that makes us unique, and it's not. Uh, I guess it's not as unique around the world, but people are becoming more inclusively thought uh, thought process in our youth, especially because of
Yeah,
you know the games and the edutainment that they're exposed to.
right.
Um, but again, when we're talking about incentive, the incentive is for to drive thought, which then drives actions and words, um, which is kind of what we're trying to do in regards to um, copiosis, which
That's
we're
right.
trying to fix the incentive problem.
That's right.
Um, and what what you know, a pathway to get from where we are now to where we are aiming to be is you know, it involves a lot of different things, both the human side, you know, and volunteering and love and doing things because you want to instead of are required to.
Hmm.
And then also, I'd argue that there's this digital side, which has to
Hmm.
provide for, you know, decentralized, beneficial, artificial general intelligence that can be able to monitor all the things we want it to, and then have that be built on a decentralized protocol which can account for all the different biases that we have,
Yeah.
and create the closest thing to an objective reality that we can get to at this point in our understanding. Because reality is clearly subjective, and I've mentioned that in one of my other talks with the emergent realities and such.
Yep.
But if we can build into a decentralized protocol all the as many to account for all of the biases that humans have in their innate thought process and action driven lifestyles, and then just build on top of that from there, because if we're able to document more and more, that means we're realizing more and more about our own capabilities.
Right. Well, this is where the intersection comes in with what you're talking about, because the prime element of Copiosis that can do what you're describing is our algorithm process. And so, it's too bad Jarek's not on the show, because he'd be a good addition to this conversation, because what we're designing with the algorithm is the ability to do just that, is to amalgamate, to bring in everybody's values at the level of community, whatever community looks like for the individual, and then rank the values according to the values that the community overall has, which then incorporates everyone's opinion and creates an objective reality that only applies to how people get rewarded. So you can have your individual subjective reality, which is the only real reality. You can have your individual subjective reality and thrive inside of that, while your rewards or your awards are coming as a result of the objective reality, which is defined by the amalgamation or the aggregation of everyone's values in that community. And then the community values are kind of recursive, so that your local community's values play the biggest. Well, your subjective community, because it's not necessarily the physical place you live. It could be if the most of the people you interact with are online, then your community is those people. So it's your local community, and then from there it's the next largest valence larger than that. So it might be your city, for example, and then larger than that, it might be the state, and then region, and then potentially nation, and then global. So all of those levels get incorporated into the algorithmic process of weighing the values that people have. And so it seems like that would be impossible to do, but it's so interesting, because where we're emerging, and this is where your 7Ds come in, so the 7Ds we talked about in our last show last Saturday. So with decentralization and democratization and dematerialization and all the other Ds occurring through technology, we are more and more able to do what we're talking about here. And the interesting thing about it is, as we design this solution that does what we're talking about, it has the effect of decreasing the influence that the 5 power pillars have on society. Would you agree with that?
I would. So, but in general, I'm not saying that the efficiency or the productivity that is a product of that power pillar would go away. Through the mechanisms which you've definitely detailed in the website. Go check out the website.
Yeah.
Uh, that ability to impose your will diminishes over time the more and more the system's used, because these rewards are going to be based on not only your contribution to the business, but then everything else you're doing as well. So you're gonna focus less on controlling below, because that's just going to happen automatically, because people want to accumulate money, but then being able to separate power from that accumulation, that is key with the exchange.
Well, so let me jump in there and clarify that even more, because so that people can understand. So right now, one of the reasons why power concentrates in the pillars is because it is through the pillars that the individuals in the pillars are able to amass more wealth, i.e., money. And in the world we live in today, there are very narrow channels through which money can come to people. Usually it's jobs or investments in capital, and so, or assets. And so a person who wants to accumulate more wealth, which makes sense to do in our current reality, needs to leverage those narrow channels in order to increase their amount of, um, I need to turn off my monitor because my internet is saying that I'm slowing down the internet with so much consumption of bandwidth. Okay, in order to increase their wealth, they have to emphasize their efforts in those channels. But in Copiosis, as Christopher just said, your wealth, the income that you're receiving, is coming not just from your day job, but it's also coming from how you interact with people and how you interact with the planet, and whether or not you're pursuing a passion and if that passion is impacting other people. So there are income streams coming from all directions as opposed to just your job. And so if you want to amplify the amount of income you're receiving in Copiosis, you want to put your attention in areas where the income is coming from. And since there's far more areas that income is coming from in Copiosis, you don't have to manipulate this narrow channel called your job in order to increase your income. Yeah.
Right. And then if you think about it, um, what we call royalties today or residuals
Yeah.
today is from a single action you can keep on getting payments over time
Yep.
indefinitely,
Yep.
and that's going to become a regular thing
For
with
everybody.
code, because you're gonna create this original, I don't even know what, like, feeling in the universe, which can expand upon itself, and then
Yep.
and then you receive not only derivatives, not only the residual and royalty of that initial meeting, but then the derivatives of everything that springs from that meeting. So
That's
that's
right.
that's going a little deep into it, but with these technologies that are being developed today as a prerequisite to be able to account for all of those things, it's mid decade, that stuff's going to be prime time. So it is coming, and we are positioning ourselves to be able to take advantage of it.
That's right. And
And
so go ahead, Chris. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, and then I'd say, people are limited uh, by education and knowledge in this space. Um, and they're like,
Yep.
oh, that's fanciful, or that's not the case. And then I'm telling you, this stuff has been, there's decades of research, and then we got into blockchain 12 years ago, and then since then we've created a revolution in mathematics, and now there's this new renaissance in statistics that's starting right now. So we're going to be able to do things that we wouldn't even thought possible 5 years ago.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so back to the five power pillars, and we only talked about four of them. And the fifth one, I think, was the big bucket, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So the idea then, this is where our five power pillar leverage strategy dovetails with the 7Ds, because as demonetization and decentralization and democratization occurs, all of that puts more power in the individual's hand, which removes power from the pillars and thereby decreases the influence of the pillars, not only in individual lives, but in commerce generally. Is that correct?
So yeah, that's going to be the prevailing wind. It's not going to be an overnight thing.
Correct.
Um, it's like people awakening to, oh, there really are lots of things going on out there that are outside the purview of my, where I get my information from. And it's like, so, but yeah, through taking advantage of, you know, by, okay, by following, by figuring out what it is an individual wants,
Yeah.
and then focusing your thoughts on what you are wanting. We're, that's that's going to be what's going to be required from us as individuals. So right now it's like, oh, I want to, I want to go get, I want to make I want to earn income, so I have to
Yeah.
go enter into the way we make income today, which is
Yeah.
specific and narrow,
Yeah.
requires specialization in most
Yep.
cases,
Yep.
um, and then then you're subject to the chain of command and
Yep.
uh, constantly being reviewed and edited and
Manipulated. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right, which can take away from that thinking about what you want, and then you think about, oh, this is what I'm required to do instead of what I want to do, and then
Yes.
um, that's where billions of people are right now. So,
Yes.
um, but when we start to think about 7Ds affecting things like education, healthcare, um, clothing, food and water, and shelter. Those are the five necessities which Copiosis has proposed to provide for people who participate in the system.
Yeah.
Um, right now with the current infrastructure, the current incentives, the current procurement, everything, research and development. Um, it would require a mindset change and a realization and a kind of bifurcation and a compartmentalization, as long as the other system still exists, which is possible. But I'm thinking, it's going to require that realization plus the demonetization and dematerialization of all of these things that have accumulated cost structures that again accumulate power pillars around them,
Right.
which then go to government to create laws which would further accumulate it. And I
Yep.
argue that the Affordable Care Act was essentially that. And it's neither here nor there, but
Yeah.
I have my own opinions being a
I get
Republican,
it.
but
Yep, I get it. I get it. Let's take a break. So we're a little bit past time. So you are watching. So first of all, audience, thank you so much for coming and watching this live stream. If you're watching it on the post-recorded version, thank you for watching it post-recorded. We're talking about the five power pillars and how they affect life on the planet and how we are leveraging the five power pillars to create a new type of life on the planet, one aligned with the principles of copiosis. If you don't know a lot about copiosis and you're wanting to find out more, you can go to this website, copiosis.com, where we have a ton of information about how the system works, what it is about, how it benefits you, and how we're transitioning to the society that is described in the innovation. If you're interested in finding out how we use the money that people are giving us, you can go to this website and find out what our budget is, where the money goes, and even where the money comes from to some degree. If you're interested in becoming a patron yourself and want to support Copiosis and our efforts, you can go to that website too and become a patron for as little as $1 a day. And then finally, I urge you to hit that subscribe button, because when you do so and click the bell, you will receive notifications when we schedule new live streams from time to time and when we post new videos. And I just want to give a quick shout out to the action group team at Copiosis that is primarily responsible for generating the content that we put on the YouTube channel besides the live stream. So big shout out to Simone Moore and her team, TC Townsend and KJ McElrath, for putting together the format that allows us to communicate to the public at large. All right, awesome. So let's get back to our talk with Christopher Hatton. We're talking about the five power pillars and how we're leveraging those power pillars. And to a large degree, Christopher, it's not like we're interacting directly with the power pillars, but a lot of the organizations in our ecosystem have tended, in my experience, to think in a purist sense, where they say, the power pillars, they probably don't acknowledge them as those, but the pillars of power in society are evil, and we're not going to interact with them. We're going to do our best to do what we're doing and basically deflate their power by sucking people out of the places where they exert their power and therefore cause a collapse. And what we're doing at Copiosis instead is we're saying, hey, the power pillars are powerful, and so let's engage with the power pillars where they exert their power and use that to create the reality we want. That's why, for example, we're currently in the process of reorganizing Copiosis as a nonprofit so that we can interact with the nonprofit sector and thereby get funding to implement our transition process. And then with regard to government, thanks to your great leadership, we're in the process of putting together a political strategy where we will be fielding political candidates to assume seats in legislative office. And then, of course, in business, we have, as part of our roadmap and transition strategy, creating supply chain analysis value creation processes using our algorithm to help businesses come more in line with the philosophy underneath Copiosis, because we see that our net benefit algorithm can have huge benefit to industries as they strive themselves to become more sustainable and socially responsible. And then finally, with regard to spirituality, it's not like we're directly involved with churches, but we do have a philosophical arm or philosophical bent to Copiosis. We call it our fundamental philosophy, where we're encouraging people to see the world around them as their subjective reality. And by focusing on aspects of that reality that are positive, they themselves become positive. And when they do that, they see the world more positively. So in those ways, we are interacting with these power pillars in a way that leverages the power they have to our benefit, which increases or amplifies our results in the world. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to explain it. And I think other people in the space, attacking power pillars and saying, oh, the only way it's going to work is if we burn it down and destroy that and then create it, and then phoenix from the ashes.
Exactly.
That's one way of looking at it. And as I've argued before, I kind of have an ideology that has kind of both of those mindsets in place, where I believe the institution itself is evil, but the people inside of it might not be. So
Yeah.
by engaging the people inside of it,
Yeah.
you're able to create this. Well, first you're able to tap into the institutional memory, and then you're able to say, hey, let's take advantage of this good mindset and see if we can create a new system that can provide for everything that pillar is providing.
Yep.
Outside of that pillar, and that's a decentralization mechanism. But further back to the individual, when we're talking about individual power, back in leadership classes in grad school and stuff, we're talking about the 7 bases of power. And just real quick, you got legitimate, coercive, expert power, informational power,
Yeah.
reward power,
Yeah.
connection power, and referent power. So
yeah.
this is beginning to be pretty abrasive to the new world also, because and I've said this before, like, experts will tell you how you can't do something, and that
Exactly.
accelerates innovation. So people will just innovate around you now. So
Right.
expert power it's
Right.
still viable, like in committee or in courts and really centralized entities, but people are accumulating new sets of skills every 8 months now. It was every 18 months just 2 years ago. So then they're accumulating new skills and then creating new jobs and then training underneath, but then at the same time creating a new skill, which creates new products and stuff. So it's moving way faster.
Yeah.
And then referent power, I think, will always be there, of course, because in academia we're required to cite, so you're giving referent power to that original source.
Yeah.
But I think with things like Neuralink and connect, in the distant future, connecting your brain to the cloud, if you're interested in that kind of thing, we're going to start to have thoughts which might already be in the database, which will automatically be cited.
Yeah.
So then you have thoughts being cited, and then you have thoughts meeting with other thoughts in the cloud that can then create this new idea
New idea. Yeah.
or anything. So
Yeah.
but I'd argue that all those bases of power are becoming less and less important, and there's 3 new ones that are surfacing that are becoming more and more important. And it's just attributes that can empower an individual, and that's kind of what we're getting to, and Copiosis can provide for that if we relieve the stressors of everyday society off the backs of people.
Yeah.
And the first one, I would argue, is teaching a person how to learn. So if you learn how to learn, then nothing's going to stop you. And the way it is now, you're taught in a specific way. And some of it does revolve around teaching you how to learn, but most of it is just, this is what you should know.
Yeah.
And that's a centralized power pillar.
Exactly. I'm surprised
Um,
education isn't a power pillar, but go on.
I mean, it is, it's government, so,
Oh,
you
right.
know,
Gotcha. Yeah.
but learning how to learn is so education need not be government. That's what I'm trying
Right.
to say.
Gotcha.
And the internet provides for that. So
Yep. Yep.
it's really taken off since the internet. The second one I would say is the ability to ask questions. So, leadership, good leaders now are like chief question askers.
Yes.
So we're going out into the unknown, and we're going to find this out together, and then, not being afraid to fail is in there too. um, but then the third piece, most importantly, is the ability to adapt to change, because we get stuck in, oh, I don't want things to change. I want to
Yeah.
be comfortable. I want to
Yeah.
do this. I want to do that. And so those three things will start to empower people more than any of these other bases of power, in my opinion, in the near future.
I think you're right, and we are heading a lot in that direction. And part of the challenge that I think we're facing is the resistance people have to these things that you're talking about, because we're not used to. I mean, let's face it, the power pillars have trained us to not want to do those things because we have such a um, Ross Douthat, a conservative author, puts it really great. He says we live in this state of decadence, and the people who are most enjoying the state of decadence don't want things to change because it's so decadent, it's so lovely. And so, in order for that to remain, we have to keep people from doing what you're talking about, from learning how to learn, from learning how to be flexible, to constantly wanting to learn. And so, that's where we're seeing some of this resistance is the 7Ds is kind of forcing these attributes that you're talking about, forcing us to develop these attributes, because in a world that's dynamically changing moment by moment, and it's getting to be that it's getting to be a moment by moment dynamic change. You have to have those capabilities in order to thrive. So yeah, it's very exciting to think about. And the way you've been touching on copiosis throughout the show really illustrates the fundamental nature of copiosis, in the sense that it creates a framework that frees humanity not just from earning a living, but also from these other ways of being that have been kind of trained into us, that keep us from, as individuals, living our fullest potential. Most of us don't even know what our fullest potential is. We're just satisfied with a 9 to 5 job and being able to cover our debt.
Yeah.
But there's this huge opportunity available to every individual on the planet where they can live a life of their wildest dreams. And we're getting to the point where that becomes eminently possible. But to get there, we have to have this transition process. And I think that transition process is copiosis. Yeah.
Great. Well said. I think I think that you're right. And no, kind of doing a full circle here from last week's show. You know, the quickest way to remove something from government, business, nonprofit, religion is to digitize it, and then that starts the whole process to
Yeah.
decentralization.
Yeah.
So education's already there,
Yeah.
and now it's just about acceptance and knowledge and spread. So
Chris, for the people who don't understand what you just said, because that was profound what you just said, explain why it is that digitizing something basically diffuses the power pillars.
because you're creating a digital twin, so you're able to subject it to testing at the speed of your current computational rate in the world. And so you're able to give so many different ways that something can happen, different scenarios and hypothesis, and testing, out the different mathematical algorithms, which are now expanding into trig and geometry and calculus, because it was
Mm.
just limited to algebra. Um, and then so you're able to create these new potential site maps and you know uh, incremental goals to get to an actual reality. But then at the same time, you're able to say, hey, what if we converge this with something else? does that widen the scope? And then what's on the adjacent of what's possible in this pathway? And does that widen the scope? And then all of this can be computed digitally. So
Now, let me just jump in here because I think you're onto it. So, would you agree that cryptocurrency is a good example of this, where we have taken this thing called money, we've digitized it, and as a result of digitizing it and making it basically mathematical, all kinds of people have flocked to this and have created many, 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 many different versions of currencies. And the currencies are now getting so valuable in the minds of people that they're beginning to compete with the physical currency. And the more that happens, the more people take it and iterate. They come up with new versions of this digital currency. And that's why we have Bitcoin and Ethereum and ADA and Holo and all the other cryptocurrencies that we have that have at the basis of their value the potential of implementing the technology that underlies them that makes things really great, that has the potential of making things even more decentralized, demonetized, dematerialized, and democratized. Is that a good example of what you're talking about here?
yeah, so that's a great example, and I think people are still, needing more education in the crypto space because, you know, like Bitcoin itself is definitely meant to replace money itself. But then when we think of money itself, it's like, oh, money itself in its current state drives everything in the world.
Yeah,
But if you break it down into this micro economic, kind of mindset, it's like, what about the money that goes towards making sure supply chains are fluid?
right,
And then cryptocurrency is created for that specific purpose,
right.
which then can replace money in that use. So it's all
Hmm.
about how money is used in a specific case, and then creating a cryptocurrency that can replace money in that specific case by making everything fluid and you all of it. In general, all cryptocurrencies have these three attributes. Cryptographic security, decentralized decision-making apparatus, and then distributed storage. So the decentralized decision-making apparatus that is inherent in all blockchains um, is what's going to remove power and uh, influence from these specific use cases of money. So um, it's really interesting, when you get to know more about it.
Yeah, I'm really fascinated by it, and maybe it seems like every time we end a show, Christopher, we end up with an idea for the next show. And I've been thinking maybe we need to take a break from these Saturday sessions because it's been every Saturday for the last 3 weeks. But now it seems like we're going to have at least two more, one with Michael Vick, and then one maybe talking about the decentralization of money and how these things are naturally seemingly leading to copiosis. It's just really fascinating when you start thinking about this kind of thing. So
Right.
we have 2 minutes left. Is there anything else you want to add before we close out the show today?
Yeah, I just want to say that you know the ability to, I think all humans are inherently uh, powerful in their own aspect,
Yeah.
and we are limited by the collection and accumulation of the power pillars from which we interact with, because largely most of us live in the society that they have designed for us.
Yes.
There are undergrounds, and there are homeless, and there are people that refuse to interact, and they're subject to coercion or life risking activities and such. But it need not be that way. I think that the technologies that are being born today are starting to empower us at a level where we can start to take advantage of our own needs in our own way. And I think it's up to people like you and me to make that happen. So the more we focus on the negative, and the more we listen to the news, the more we're gonna, propagate that future into existence. So join us in thinking of a new way of doing things, and make it your purpose to seek joy in the world.
Right on, Chris. That was a beautiful ending, and we're just going to end it right there. Thank you, everybody, for watching the live stream today. We've been talking about the 5 power pillars. I have to say, this is probably one of the best conversations we've had so far. If you're interested in, or you have a question about what we've talked about, please leave a comment in the comment section. We'll be getting back to everybody who makes a comment. If you like this show, please like it for us. Looks like we have 2 likes so far, because that helps the algorithm on YouTube show this show to other people. And then finally, if you're interested in finding out more about our innovation and what we're doing to create this amazing world we're talking about in the future, go to, there it is, go to copiosis.com and find out more. We're excited about what we're doing. We want you to be excited about what we're doing. Christopher, thank you so much for being on the show today. Wonderful having you. Bye, everybody.